Welcome to the Idea Box Show, presented by the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. You've reached episode number 30 for Wednesday, April 15th, 2015. This is the show where we explore the work school librarians are doing every day, from teaching to technology and collection development to collaboration. On each show, we feature a rock star school librarian sharing ideas that we can all learn from. I'm your host, Mary Morgan Ryan. I'm a pre-K to 5 school librarian in the western suburbs of Chicago. The Idea Box Show is a series of casual conversations with school librarians of all kinds, sharing ideas and expanding our personal learning networks. So today we're lucky we get to talk to Andy Plemmons about expanding your school library web presence. So welcome, Andy.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your school library.
Sure. I am the school library media specialist at David C. Barrow Elementary. It's in Athens, Georgia, and we are a pre-K through 5th grade school. We have almost 600 students, and we are situated kind of right on the south end of the University of Georgia campus, which makes for some great collaboration opportunities with the local college there. So in our library, we do a lot of Skyping and Google Hangouts with authors and guest speakers and developers, and we really try to get students' work beyond the walls of our school.
Wonderful. And I know you're going to be talking today about the blog that you have, and that's how I found you, so I'm excited to learn more about it. EdReach appreciates your support. One of the ways you can continue to support us is by rating us on iTunes. Go to edreach.us/network and find your favorite shows, or for this show, simply go to our SoundCloud page, which is soundcloud.com/ideaboxshow. And click on the iTunes link. A little iTunes love goes a long way. Thanks again for your support. So, Andy, we are here to talk about the idea of expanding our library's presence on the internet. And you are definitely a person that we can all learn from. So tell us about how your school library's web presence has changed sort of since you started thinking about this.
Yeah, so I've been in the school library for about 7 years now. And my very first year, I wanted to start a blog. And I really started the blog more as a communication tool for our parents. And I thought, this would be a great way to show some of the things that are going on in our library. And so I started, just maybe a weekly post, or sometimes every couple of weeks, posting about things going on. But then what started to happen was that my work started to be shared because it was online. So other people were looking at what we were doing in our library, and they were starting to share it at conferences and social media. One of the big sharers of my work was Buffy Hamilton. She's a phenomenal colleague, and so she really was a champion for our library and really shared some of the ideas that I was doing at several conferences that she spoke at. And so just more and more people started to read the blog. It was I will say, it was very, very slow in the beginning doing the blog. Some months we might have less than 100 views for the entire month. But what I learned was the more that you the more that you show your work in many different kinds of ways, the more people start to find it and look at it. And so when I was at this point of just doing the blog, and I realized through surveying our families that really our families were learning about our library in lots of different ways and wanted to stay connected in lots of different ways.
Wait. How did you survey the families?
All right, so I did every year I would do a Google form survey. And so I would give the link to that in a traditional newsletter, but also I would have the link to email out to people who got email newsletters. And so I would give that survey to students, to teachers, and to families. And so an interesting thing that came out of the family surveys was how people learned about the library. There were specific comments. I remember people saying, I don't read anything that comes home in my child's folder, which was an interesting, interesting comment to hear. But if something is on my Facebook feed, that I read it. And so it made me realize every time I'm sharing something in a different way, I'm reaching a different audience. So that's what kind of caused me to create. So I have the blog. I also have a library Facebook page. I have a Twitter account for the library. I also have a personal Twitter account that I use the most, and really I only use it professionally. So when I post something to the blog, it automatically connects to the Facebook page and the library Twitter account. So, everything kind of posts into all those different places at the same time. And then, of course, with Twitter, you're able to use all kinds of different hashtags to get your work connected to different groups of people, whether they follow you or not. So I think that's really important too, when you're thinking about getting your work out, that you're looking at the different communities. And I certainly feel like I'm not quite there as far as reaching the communities that I could be reaching on Twitter. I really need to look at some more hashtags and what I might tag my work with so that it reaches audiences that I really wasn't reaching originally. So the blog really moved from this parent communication tool to really, it is a showcase of what's going on in our library, and not just showcasing, but also being honest about what didn't work and what worked well, so that people can learn from it. So I get comments from librarians really all around the world asking questions. Also through Twitter, people are asking me questions. So it really has made us globally connected.
So I'm thinking about your original intent of communicating with your parents as you've continued to do your survey. Have the avenues that you use to communicate with your parents changed? Do you think?
Well, I mean, I still do all of the same kinds of communication. I think there's still parents who read that traditional newsletter, and that's all they do. So I think that it's still important having that piece of paper. And then that newsletter also gets emailed to people.
Help me sort this out in my head, because inspired by you, and I was telling you this before we started recording, I spent about a year blogging pretty seriously. I took it seriously. I wrote, I really tried to put out there what we're doing in the library. Excuse me. And I didn't feel as though it was I felt as though the audience for that was other educators. And so I've been toying with this whole idea of perhaps a professional blog, which I've seen some librarians do, of sort of that it's not intended for parents to know what's going on in the library. It's musings and reflections and things like that on your library practice. That's why I was asking you, do you feel like parents read your blog? Do you see where I'm going with this? I'm thinking about audience. Mm-hmm. And I think what's happened with you is that your parents are reading that blog, those who choose to get information in that way, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now when I write a post, I'm not writing it thinking that this is just informing parents about what's going on in the library. Now I'm writing it in a way that I feel like it does inform parents, but at the same time, it also helps other educators, whether they're classroom teachers or they are teacher librarians, or anyone in education really gets an idea and thinks about what it might look like in their own space. So I try to talk about what worked, what didn't, and be honest with that.
Okay. And so, and you're doing that as on your Barrow Media Center blog.
Right.
Right. Okay.
I am.
So
for me, it all meshes. It all meshes together. I have thought about, do I need to separate it so that it's professional, it's just me. But for me, it's really hard to separate the two.
No, I agree.
I just don't know. I think I would have a hard time writing in two different ways. To me, it just all connects together.
Well, and for me, before I kind of got discouraged, I was using it as a reflective piece. I felt like writing the blog posts really helped me reflect on my teaching and my practice, and the act of laying it all out sort of improved my teaching. So I guess what advice would you give to somebody who doesn't have a champion like Buffy Hamilton and who feels as though I or anybody else in my situation, because I know that there are others who feel like we would like to share and we would like to showcase our work, but it's discouraging when you say, oh goodness, sometimes I only get 100 hits. Well, there are a lot of us out there who would be overjoyed if 100 people were interested in what we had to say. So
right.
I wonder what tips you might give to get more connected with that.
Yeah, well, I think one, there's a piece about building your own professional learning network, not really even thinking about your blog, but just building an online community of people that you talk with, getting involved in a Twitter chat like TL Chat and starting to find other librarians that you connect with. Because for me, when I have made these connections with people online, generally those people that I've started to develop a more personal connection with, they read the blog because they want to know more about things we've talked about on Twitter, and then they share it. And so when they share it, then it gets shared with their networks of people. So I think there's this piece of it that's not really about your blog. It's about developing your network. And I also still feel strongly about, face-to-face conference, presenting at conferences. I think, each time that you put your work out there in different ways, you show what's going on, you gain some credibility with, more and more people. So if somebody comes to your conference presentation, whether it's a national conference or a state conference or a local conference, all of those people start to look at you as a person that they want to continue the conversation beyond your presentation. And so I think that helps develop a readership on your blog. And then certainly finding, ways to get your work out, not necessarily in a blog, but trying to get an article published, or there's so many ways to kind of get your work out there. Over the few years that I've been using Twitter, I've started using it more and more. The first time I used Twitter was at the AASL conference when it was in Charlotte. And that was really the first time I'd used Twitter professionally. And I really still feel like I didn't use it a whole lot even after that conference. But over time, I started to see that this was a quick way for me to sort of document little snippets of the day. And so now I've always got my phone in my pocket. I'm always taking pictures, and in the midst of a lesson, I'm sneaking up behind a student over their shoulder, snapping a picture and tweeting it. And so the kids have really, I do it so much that they know, they know what's happening. It's just become a part of what we do. But I think each time that you share something, even if it's a small little snippet, and you get it out to a community, then that's connecting you to more people. It's not, and then those people may gravitate eventually towards your blog. I don't know. I just don't know if I have a magic answer. But when I look back at the posts that I did the very first year, 7 years ago, they're so terrible. The blog posts are so terrible, I think. But it just shows, when you do it over time, it shows, how much you grow as an educator by taking time to do these posts. Like you were saying, it's a very reflective process. And I certainly have, I have kind of gotten down to, I don't want to call it a science necessarily, but I've sort of found this framework for developing my blog posts. So now that I'm doing so much tweeting and taking little video clips and things, really all day I'm constructing a blog post. And then at the end of the day, it's just sitting down and pulling all those links of tweets that I've done during the day and videos that I may have posted on Vine or Twitter, and putting them all into a post and then expanding a little bit upon them.
That makes a lot of sense. About how long does that take you if you sit down to do that? And I love that. Well, I'm sure it varies, but
it does. It depends on how often I'm interrupted too, which, as you know, in a library can be a lot. So, I do try as much as I can to do my post before I leave school, while it's fresh in my mind at the end of the day. Sometimes at the very beginning of the next school day, if I feel like there's going to be a moment before classes start up, I do blog at home too. I will be honest. I do a lot of work at home as well. So if I sit down uninterrupted, I can usually have a blog post done in 20 minutes or less.
Yeah, because like you said, you're sort of almost
it's all there.
Curating, yeah, for lack of a better word, the content that you've kind of generated during the day.
Yeah. And some days, if I'm feeling super organized, I will have a draft post already open in a tab on my computer. And so anytime there's a moment where I know I've just tweeted something, if there's a moment for me to grab that link right then, I just grab it and paste it into that post, and it's waiting there for me when I can actually sit down and think and expand. So I try to be as efficient with time as I can.
Don't we all? Yes.
Yeah.
So I've heard Twitter, Vine, Facebook, a blog. I'm not sure which tool you use for blogging. So that's 4 things. Am I missing anything? Twitter, Vine, Facebook, and a blog?
Those are the main ones. I really want to start an Instagram account for the library. I haven't gotten to that step yet. But I actually had a student ask me a couple of days ago, does the library have an Instagram account? It was a 4th grader. I was really surprised when he asked me that. I mean, I shouldn't have been, but it was really interesting because he wanted to follow the library Instagram account. So there are libraries who have an Instagram account and have it installed on a device so that kids can document the day. So it's not just necessarily the librarian documenting everything. And so I'm really interested in doing that. I just haven't launched that. And now that Twitter has the video feature, I am not doing as many Vines because now you can do a much longer video in Twitter that's essentially the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I think I've seen you do it is, like you said, it kind of starts from a blog post and then moves into tweeting or sharing on Facebook or something like that. And you said you have it set so it automatically shares? Right.
It automatically, so as soon as I press publish on a post, it automatically posts to the library Twitter account, the library Facebook account, and then it also connects to Google+. So that was another thing that I didn't say. So we're a Google Apps for Education district. So I have a school Google Plus account, and I also have a personal Google Plus account. And so it posts to both of those as well. So all of that's instant when I click publish.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had parent questions or concerns about sharing student photos or student work online?
No.
Okay.
I have, in our district, we have a it's an opt-out form for students having their, it basically just says their work, and their work consists of everything from their picture to their voice to a piece of writing they've done. And we really have very few students in our school that opt out, and it takes some work on the part of our office. Luckily, our office manages that piece. It's not something I have to do as the librarian. So when somebody opts out, we always do a follow-up with them, and we're not trying to make them let us post their child's picture, but just so that they understand what they're opting out of. And sometimes when they realize that, they will change their mind because they didn't realize that it's taking all these different opportunities away from their child. But we do still have people who opt out, and so we of course honor that. And so those kids, we try to we include them as much as possible, but they just aren't able to have their work posted as much. And so it certainly is hard to do, and I certainly have made mistakes here or there that I have to quickly correct. But I've never had anybody question posting the work out there. I've had lots of people compliment that I'm getting kids' work out to an audience beyond our school.
Right. I think a lot of schools have what you have. We have a do not photo, we call it, list, and I have basically those kids in my head. Because like you, we don't have very many, and certainly absolutely respect a parent's choice. And there are a lot of different reasons that people choose,
Right.
to opt out or opt in or whatever. But yeah, we have the same situation. I was just, when we're talking about sharing out work on Twitter and Facebook, it could make some parents a little nervous. So I just was wondering if you'd ever faced that. But it sounds like your district does a good job of explaining that and covering that in the form, the opt-out form.
Yeah, and our district is really focused on technology and really trying to get kids involved in online collaboration and being good digital citizens. And it's, there's a lot to all of that. But, I feel like for the most part, our parents are very supportive of kids getting their work online. And I do try to be conscious as I'm taking pictures. A lot of times I'm not, I do take, full face pictures, but a lot of times it's an over the shoulder pic of a kid,
That's
on an iPad. So you're seeing what work that they're doing on their iPad. So it's not always just a picture of a kid's face. And of course there's never any first and last name, lots of identifying information on the picture. So, I try to be mindful about those kinds of things.
Right. Oh goodness, I had something I wanted to ask you. I'm sure it'll come back to me. I was wondering if you could share with us which tool you use for blogging now that I'm thinking about it. Do you use WordPress?
I do. I use WordPress. And there's really not a particular reason that I use WordPress other than that's what I started with. I actually, when I first became a librarian, I did a 40-hour technology boot camp that our district did, because I came from a district that did not have, it was bare bones technology. I still had a chalkboard in my classroom and a couple of clunky computers in the back corner. So I knew that coming into a media specialist job that I really was going to be looked at as the expert in technology with lots of questions to me. So I felt like I needed to, boost that knowledge a little bit before I went into the role. And that was the tool that they featured in that boot camp was WordPress. And so that's kind of how I started with that. I mean, if I were starting a blog today, it would probably be Blogger just because we're Google Apps and it integrates in with that as far as your sign in.
Right. Okay. So usually about this time, I ask people what recommendations they have if somebody's inspired and wants to follow in their footsteps. And so um, I think we've talked a little bit about it though already. And what I heard you say was start baby steps, sort of. Do a blog post and then share it out, and try to connect with people on Twitter that, like you said, might be interested in reading what you have to say, because then when you post something and you tweet it out, then your connections on Twitter might read it and share it. And the other thing that I'm thinking as we're talking is I'm not necessarily sure that I should be worried about how many people are reading it. I'm just kind of wondering if I'm using this as a professional sort of reflective tool, maybe the number of hits isn't as important as the act of writing it. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard lots of people talk about that, and it certainly is fun to see your stats, increase each year. I mean, I'm not going to lie that I look at my stats a lot to see how many people are reading. I love seeing where people are reading from and how many are reading. But I mean, I think you're right in thinking that you really have to think about what your purpose of blogging is. And for me, ultimately, although I love inspiring people and I love people reading it, for me, it's more about showing the work, showing what's going on in our library. Because I think the more we show our work, and as people start to read that, we're helping to break all of those stereotypes of what happens in a library that's so ingrained in people's minds. From still on television and movies and books today, librarians are that quiet, shushing old lady with glasses and a bun, and there are libraries like that, but there are a lot of libraries that are not, and I think it's really important for us to show our work, no matter how many people are reading that.
So let me wrap it up with this. I remembered what it was. That I was trying to remember. When you have an announcement like the book fair's tomorrow, do you put that on your blog?
Not usually.
Okay.
Now, when I first started the blog, yes. Those were some of the kinds of posts that I did. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, because I certainly do some announcement kinds of things on the blog. But, when I look at who's reading the blog, talking about the book fair is probably not reaching the right people on the blog. So that kind of thing I would put in my newsletter. I do put it on our library Facebook page, even though we have several people who follow the library Facebook page that are not part of our school community. But we have a lot of people that are. So I do put it there and in the newsletter, and then my principal would also share it. So it wouldn't be something for the blog.
Right. It's just that sort of entangling and disentangling the intended audience of different communications. It's something to really think through, I think. And I was.
So I did. Can I share an interesting story that happened with the blog recently?
Please.
So I love sharing student work, and empowering student voice is one of my library goals. So I want to listen to individual students and try to help them explore their passions and get their work out to who it needs to be seen by. So one of the things that happened was that a group of kindergartners started using this app called StoryKit on the iPad, and they through a whole series of lessons, they ended up making their own ebooks about space. And so their work inspired a student in another kindergarten class who wanted to make his own ebook. And so he started coming and working with me on a book about seahorses, just individually. His teacher signed him up for lessons just with me. So we worked on it and posted it. I did a blog post just about him and his process, and put a link to his book on the blog. And at the end of it, I asked people, if you have a comment for Mick, then leave it in the comments and I'll make sure that he sees it. Well, of course, lots of his family chimed in, reading it and saying good words to him. But just the other day, I had a post that was from a student at Illinois State University, and his ebook had been assigned as homework for their college class. It had been assigned as reading, and it was obviously not a requirement to make a comment because the whole class didn't do it. But this one student made a comment and said that it was an assignment, but they wanted to take time to tell Mick what a great job he did, and that they had shared it with all of their friends, and that their friends were impressed that a kindergartner had written this. So it's just amazing to me that a student's work that would have just been hanging on the wall of the school or to weigh in a folder suddenly it has a far-reaching audience, a very authentic audience, and that student truly is a published author beyond just feeling like they've published something to read to their class.
What a wonderful story. That's the perfect way to end this discussion, because it really shows the power of dedicating yourself to trying, to building that audience and sharing out. I think that's wonderful. And before we started recording, I was telling you that I really did try and I got discouraged. And I think I need to think carefully about who I'm writing for and why I'm writing, and try again. That's the lesson I'm getting from you, Andy.
Good.
So we are now wrapping up. We've wrapped up our discussion of expanding your library's web presence, and we're going to move on to shout outs. I would just like to give a shout out to SoundCloud. It is a tool that I've started using for the podcast. I'm now posting to SoundCloud instead of using WordPress, and really enjoying how easy it is and making some new connections. I also have a school. We tend to do things at my school by the whole school has a Twitter account, and the whole school has a SoundCloud account, and the whole school has a YouTube account. Rather than we're a fairly small building, so it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have different accounts for different purposes. So anyway, I started using SoundCloud for school and decided, wow, it would be a really nice tool for the podcast. So anyway, great job, everybody at SoundCloud. You're doing a wonderful job. I love your tool. So Andy, do you have anybody that you'd like to say hello to or recognize today?
Absolutely. Well, I've already mentioned Buffy Hamilton, who was such a huge support of my library program from the earliest stages. And I always thank her for continuing to push my thinking as she's moved on to other schools and public libraries. She has really been a champion for libraries in lots of different ways. Also, I have a great group of people that I collaborate with a lot on Twitter and in person. And we've been nicknamed the 1do5+1 because of some of our work we did with Evanced in Indianapolis. Those people are Shannon Miller, Matthew Winter, Sherry Gick, Shauna Ford, and Lindsay Hill. So I thank all of them for always pushing me to be a better librarian every day.
Wonderful. I always wondered what you guys were talking about when you said 1do5. I'm like, okay, it's an inside joke, but now I understand a little bit. That's great. So we were going to wrap up the show with the last segment of news, tips, or what are you reading? And I have a book that I wanted to share. I am reading it. You guys can see that. It's called Dorco the Magnificent by Andrea Beatty. And I just love the voice of the main character in this book. He's a boy who loves magic, wants to be a magician, and starts taking magic lessons from his cranky old grandma. And I haven't finished it yet, but I think it's a fast read and a great, funny read for like middle elementary kids. So Dorco the Magnificent gets my vote. It's I hope it's gonna be on our district's Battle of the Books list next year. That's why I'm reading it. We're working on that list.
Yeah.
So how about you, Andy? You have anything you want to share?
Yeah, I have a few things. Well, so while we were talking, I thought of a book that I wanted to recommend, and it is called Show Your Work, and it's by Austin Kleon. I read that this past summer, and just a lot of things resonated with things that I was already doing, but really made me realize how important each of these things are. But he really talks about how, well, one of the lines in the book is that if your work isn't online, it doesn't exist, because online is where we all congregate. We all come to communicate and share and learn different things. And so if we aren't showing our work online, and we're just keeping it closed up in our own homes or our schools, people have no idea what's going on. So that was one of the lines that really stuck out to me. But he just talks a lot about showing even just a little piece of your work every single day, no matter what it is, showing something that matters to you each day. So I highly recommend Show Your Work. And he also has another book called Steal Like an Artist, which is a great one too. But I do like Show Your Work the best. So also I was going to say that, this weekend I'll be speaking at Spring Fling in Alabama, and I'll also be speaking at the Dynamic Landscapes in Vermont in May. I'll be giving one of the keynotes there, along with super awesome Sylvia, which I can't wait to meet her. She does Sylvia's super awesome maker show. And I also just wanted to give a plug for AASL that's coming up in Columbus. For those of you that might not know, AASL is a conference that's held every 2 years. It's the National School Library Conference, and it is always just an amazing time wherever it is, because you get to connect with all of these people face to face that you've seen their work online, and you've talked to them on Twitter, and you get to walk up to people and actually have a face-to-face conversation. That's one of the things I love about going to those conferences the most, is just getting to connect with all of the people that I talk to online. So it's coming up in November in Columbus, Ohio this year.
Great. Thanks for that. You were telling us about that. I went on Amazon and ordered Show Your Work.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a really nice sort of homework assignment for those of us who are thinking about how to, like you said, break down the walls and show people what is happening in our school libraries. That's great. Thank you. Well, that's going to do it for this week on the Idea Box Show. Big thanks to Andy, our guest this week. Andy, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Plemmons A, and then my blog is barrowmediacenter.com.
Beautiful. And you can find me on Twitter at @mmorganryan, and why not follow EdReach Us on Twitter as well. Make sure to subscribe to the EdReach weekly newsletter and pass it on. You can do that at edreach.us/newsletter. The newsletters are a great way to get the latest blog posts and podcasts and news coming out of the EdReach network. So thanks again for joining us, and continue the conversation over at the EdReach network. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome. Thank you.